Have you ever had this exact experience? You sit down, you write something out, maybe an email, a proposal, a piece of code, or just a really complex train of thought, and you run it through AI, just to see what it
Just
does.
to get a second set of eyes on it, right?
Exactly.
Cool.
And in a few seconds, it comes back and it is sharper, it's cleaner. I mean, it is undeniably better.
Without a doubt, it always is.
Right. So you look at it, you accept to the AI's version, but then there's this lingering feeling. It's not dramatic enough to stop you from hitting send or anything, but you look at your original version and suddenly it feels incredibly weak.
Like you didn't do a good enough job.
Yeah. And worse, while you understand the shiny new AI version, you realize you don't really understand it. Like you didn't build it. Deep down, it almost feels, I don't know, a tiny bit like cheating.
Well, that right there is the modern intellectual hangover. The source we are diving into today actually diagnoses this very specific feeling. It calls it the quiet decline of human judgment in the age of AI. The quiet decline. I mean, that sounds ominous. Welcome to today's deep dive, by the way. Our mission today is to unpack this fascinating document and explore why getting better, faster results might actually be, well, sabotaging your personal understanding.
Yeah, and the text presents a really profound paradox right out of the gate. Because this erosion of our thinking, it does not look like a failure. It looks exactly like progress.
Right, because everything is working. Everything is clean.
Exactly. And that is precisely why it is so incredibly hard to see what is going wrong underneath the surface. You use the tool, you get better writing, you execute faster. The structure of your project is flawless. I mean, all the boxes check out.
So the conclusion we naturally draw from that flawless output is that, well, our process is working perfectly, we're getting better results, they're faster, and they're way more consistent.
But the text highlights this critical symptom that reveals the disconnect between the output and our actual capability. And the symptom emerges the exact moment you are forced to defend the work.
Oh, wow. Okay, so like when someone actually asks you about it, right? If you hand over that polished AI-generated strategy document and someone asks you, why is this good? Or why did you structure the argument this way? The illusion completely shatters.
If I'm being honest, a lot of times my internal answer would just be, well, it sounds right.
Because you wouldn't be able to explain the foundational logic clearly. Defending the subtle choices in phrasing or the specific sequence of ideas, it becomes impossible because you didn't make those choices.
The AI made them.
Exactly. The tool offered up a polished product, and your brain just recognized the pattern of a good product and said, yes, that looks correct.
It feels a lot like relying entirely on your GPS to navigate your own neighborhood.
Yeah.
You arrive at the destination faster, you make 0 wrong turns, and it feels incredibly efficient.
But what happens when your phone dies?
You're totally stranded. You couldn't draw a map of the route to save your life. You get the result, you get to your house, but you lose the internal map entirely.
And the source argues the exact same thing happens to your judgment. Your ability to get the result remains intact or even improves, but your ability to judge that result, to map the logic of it, is atrophying.
Because you are no longer building ideas from the ground up.
Right. You have quietly shifted to just recognizing what looks right.
Yeah.
And pattern recognition is a fundamentally different neurological process than active comprehension.
So if I lose that internal map, I'm basically a tourist in my own work. But what's actually happening in my brain when I do that, because it still feels like I'm doing work, right? I'm reading the AI output, I'm tweaking a few words, I'm approving it.
It feels like work, yeah.
So are you still building ideas, or have you shifted to just being an editor of things that look right? I feel like we need to understand the mechanics behind why this shift is happening.
Well, the mechanics come down to a concept the source calls AI cognitive offloading. The entire appeal of AI is that it removes friction. I mean, that is what makes it the most adopted technology in human history.
Right. But the text makes a profound argument here, which is that friction is exactly what used to force you to think.
Exactly.
So let's define this friction for a second. What does it actually look like in practice?
Okay, picture staring at a blank page or a messy, totally disorganized set of notes. You have to really struggle to pull a coherent thought out of that chaos. You write a sentence, you realize it contradicts the previous sentence.
You notice those glaring gaps in your logic.
Yeah, you realize your core premise doesn't actually hold up to scrutiny. And that struggle, that pushback from the material itself, is the forge where understanding is built. When you struggle to articulate a point, your brain is actively testing concepts against each other.
It's forging pathways and organizing knowledge, and when we use AI, we just bypass that entirely. because the tool doesn't look at a half-baked prompt and say, hey, your fundamental premise is flawed.
No, it never does that.
It just takes the messy thought, glosses over the logical gaps, and reorganizes it into something that sounds incredibly authoritative. It makes the thinking look complete even when the underlying foundation just isn't there yet.
And by outsourcing the struggle of articulating an idea, you bypass the exact cognitive process that builds deep comprehension. When you just read an AI's polished output, you are merely engaging pattern recognition centers in the brain.
You read the output and think, oh, this matches the shape of a good strategy.
Right. But recognition is not understanding.
I need to push back on this a little bit, though, because, isn't removing friction the entire point of human progress? Like, we outsourced math to calculators decades ago. We outsourced spelling to spell check.
That's a common counterargument, for sure.
Right, so I just don't see how outsourcing the first draft of a marketing strategy is fundamentally different than outsourcing the calculation of a massive spreadsheet. If the end result is the same, a great document that drives revenue, why does it matter if my brain built the scaffolding or just approved it?
Well, aren't we just moving up the value chain? That's the assumption. But the difference lies in the nature of the task you are offloading. Using a calculator is computational offloading. You are bypassing a mechanical limitation.
Okay, so long division is a deterministic process. It's not a creative or strategic one.
Exactly. When you outsource it, you free up cognitive load to focus on the higher order problem, which is deciding what those numbers actually mean for your business.
Yeah.
But when you outsource the formulation of an argument, you are outsourcing the higher order problem itself.
Oh, I see. So it's not like outsourcing the washing of clothes, where the clean shirt is the only goal. When it comes to complex ideas, the struggle actually is the value.
Yes. The process of getting from a bad draft to a good draft is what gives you authority over the idea. And because you skip the struggle, you don't actually understand the terrain of the idea.
And this leads to a fascinating psychological consequence that the text highlighted, which is that over time, you start trusting the AI's output way more than your own raw thinking.
Which goes right back to that feeling we opened with. You compare your raw, messy human draft with the AI's highly polished, frictionless version.
And your raw version rarely wins that comparison. It's always going to look uglier because it's a work in progress.
And since your raw thought rarely wins that side-by-side comparison, you start to doubt your own ideas. You begin to assume the AI structure is just inherently better.
It feels like an improvement. It feels like you are leveling up your capabilities.
But really, you are just outsourcing the heavy lifting of comprehension. And your confidence in your independent thought process begins to erode.
You know, I see this playing out vividly with software engineers right now. You have developers using AI to write complex blocks of code. The code compiles, the feature works flawlessly. On paper, they look incredibly productive.
But then reality hits.
Exactly. A week later, a subtle bug appears in the interaction between two services. And because the developer didn't struggle through writing the logic, because they didn't hit those dead ends and figure out why a certain architecture was necessary, they just stare at the code base like it's written in an alien language.
Because they didn't build the mental scaffolding.
Right. The developer in that scenario has achieved the result, but lost the capability.
And that moves us from a personal feeling of doubt to some massive professional and intellectual implications. We spend all our time worrying about AI hallucinating facts or spitting out biased data, right?
Yeah, we obsess over prompt engineering to prevent the AI from making mistakes.
But the source argues the actual threat isn't the AI giving wrong answers. It is us blindly accepting the right ones.
That is a massive paradigm shift. The danger isn't that the machine is wrong, the danger is that the machine is right, and we have absolutely no idea why.
You can get a completely correct, highly accurate answer from the tool.
Yeah.
But because you didn't build that answer, test its boundaries, or challenge its underlying assumptions, you cannot recreate it.
You can't adapt it to a slightly different context tomorrow. Your only recourse is to go back and ask the oracle again.
The AI becomes a crutch rather than an exoskeleton. And this brings up a really concerning question about our value in the workplace.
Yeah, because the source points out a reality we're all seeing right now. One person is now able to execute what entire teams used to do. Everything is faster. Automation is replacing pure execution.
So if execution is no longer our advantage, if generating code or writing copy takes 3 seconds, what is our advantage?
The source is pretty unequivocal on this point. Judgment. Human judgment is our remaining advantage.
The ability to discern, to weigh nuanced trade-offs, to understand the broader context, and to make the final call.
But wait, If judgment is our only remaining advantage over automation, we have a massive problem. Because according to the mechanics we've just discussed, judgment is the exact muscle that starts to weaken first when we rely on AI to clean up our thinking.
We are actively atrophying the one skill that keeps us valuable. It is a profound vulnerability. The text poses a diagnostic question that is incredibly revealing.
Okay, lay it on me.
Think back over the last week and ask yourself, when was the last time you trusted your first idea?
Wow, let that sit for a second. When did I last trust a raw idea without immediately throwing it into a chat window to see if it could be, optimized?
If your instinct is immediately, I should run this through AI first, then something fundamental has changed in your relationship with your own mind. It's not just a change in your tools, it's a change in your behavior.
And this is exactly where your cognitive sovereignty starts slipping.
Cognitive sovereignty, that is a brilliant term.
It really is. It's the ownership of your own mind. It's the ability to govern your own thoughts, stand behind them, and defend them. So let's ground this in reality. What does it actually look like when someone has lost that sovereignty in a professional setting?
Okay, picture a Monday morning meeting. You've circulated a project proposal for a new initiative. It's flawless. The formatting is perfect. The arguments are logically sequenced.
Everything looks great on paper.
Right. But then the VP of sales leans across the table and asks, hey, why did we prioritize market expansion over product iteration in phase 2? It seems incredibly risky given our current burn rate.
No, man, if you used AI to structure that strategy from scratch, you might just panic internally right there.
Because you don't know why phase 2 looks like that. You didn't wrestle with the trade-offs between expansion and iteration. You just recognized that the AI structure looked highly professional and, well, plausible.
So instead of defending the nuanced reasoning behind the strategy, you freeze. You fall back on generic corporate speak.
You find yourself saying something like, well, industry best practices suggest this is the optimal path.
Just because you have no internal compass for the project, you're defending a house you didn't build, you willingly handed your cognitive sovereignty over, not because the AI demanded it, but because the tool made the alternative so frictionless and easy.
And the decline doesn't happen with a dramatic crash. It is a slow, quiet fade.
Yeah.
You question the output a little less each time.
You accept the AI's structure a little faster, you check your own ideas against the AI more often, you trust yourself a little less.
Because the final product still works and still gets praised by your peers, it feels like an improvement.
Yeah.
You don't realize you've lost your sovereignty until that VP of sales asks a question you just can't answer.
The quiet decline. It's genuinely chilling when you lay out the mechanics of it like that. Okay, so we've diagnosed the problem. We are slowly losing our internal maps, our judgment, and our cognitive sovereignty because we are bypassing the necessary friction of thinking. So the natural question is how we fix this. And my first instinct here is to find a better prompt. I want to build a workflow that tells the AI to act like a Socratic tutor. Like, don't write the answer for me, just ask me guiding questions.
That makes sense.
I assume the source gives us a technical solution like that, right?
Actually, that is the most common assumption. People always look for a tactical fix. A smarter prompt, restrictive automation, a new software layer. But the source explicitly corrects this instinct.
Wait, really? So it's not a prompt thing?
No, the shift required to take back control isn't tactical at all. It is entirely behavioral. It comes down to one single factor, which is timing.
Timing. So it's not about what we type into the prompt box, but when we open the box in the first place.
When you use AI matters infinitely more than how you use it. The framework for reclaiming your cognitive sovereignty isn't about throwing your laptop in the ocean or quitting AI altogether. It's about intentionally delaying its use.
You have to consciously insert the friction back into your process.
Yes. So if I'm writing a proposal, I don't start with an AI outline. I have to stare at the blank page.
Right. You must delay using the tool until you have engaged with the friction of building the core idea yourself.
You have to map out the logic. You have to hit those dead ends, realize your argument has a hole in it, and actually figure your way out. You have to make the hard choices about what to include and what to cut.
And only after you have built the internal map, only after you have exercised your human judgment, do you bring the AI in.
Exactly. And when you do that, the dynamic completely shifts. The AI transitions from being the architect of your ideas to being the editor of your ideas.
If you let the AI be the architect, you lose the map. You forfeit your sovereignty.
But if you are the architect and you use the AI strictly to refine the execution, to tighten the prose, to check for blind spots, to format the data, You maintain your judgment.
Because you still hold the blueprint in your mind. That small change in behavior, just delaying the tool until the heavy cognitive lifting is done, is where human control is reclaimed.
It's deceptively simple, but it requires an immense amount of discipline. Because the temptation to just hit the button and let the friction disappear is always going to be sitting right there on your screen.
Oh, for sure. When you're tired, when a deadline is looming, the urge to just let the AI be the architect is so overwhelming.
And the reality is that the vast majority of people will ignore this framework. The text points this out pretty clearly. Most people will listen to this, nod along, and then go right back to their desks, ask the AI for a better version of their raw thought, keep moving, and nothing changes.
They won't notice their thinking getting weaker until they are entirely dependent on the tool to formulate even a basic strategy.
But for you listening right now, if you've felt this, if you've experienced that slight disconnect, that hesitation where your ideas don't feel completely solid anymore, well, you now know the mechanics of why.
You haven't lost your edge. You aren't becoming obsolete. You've just been bypassing the friction required to maintain that edge. You've been letting the tool draw the map.
Consider this final thought from the text. AI itself is not the problem. It is a mirror and an unprecedented amplifier of our capabilities. But it fundamentally changes our environment by removing the friction that used to shape our thinking.
Like in the physical world, if you stop lifting weights, your muscles atrophy and you notice it immediately.
Exactly. In the cognitive realm, if you stop wrestling with ideas, your judgment atrophies. But the pristine AI output masks the decline. If you do not intentionally replace that friction, you will never even notice what you are losing.
How long would it take for you to realize you've completely outsourced your personal judgment?
That is the perfect question to leave hanging in the air.
We need the friction. We need the struggle. We have to be the architects of our own minds.
Mhm.
If you want to take back control of your thinking, go to the link https://start.upgrades-in-conscience.com, which is located at the very beginning of the video description, right below the screen.